While it will take a while of time for us to become a united country, Africa have no reason to be poor, because the only continent of the world that today you can say there's a future for development and creating that enormous is Africa. And Africa is so blessed. Congo is sitting on 24 trillion worth of natural assets. They have no reason to be poor. So is Nigeria. We have from oil to other minerals to everything. We have no reason to be poor. Africa have a youthful population. While the other people are aging and everything, in Africa, we have a youthful population that is in their productive age. But they have leaders who don't want that, because those people you're calling are using those leaders. It will shock you. I was campaigning to be president of Nigeria. I'm going to tell my story and write my book on. People are inviting you, oh, we want to see you in different capitals of the world. And you go there, people say to you, we're going to put in this amount of money in your campaign, but this is going to happen, that is going to happen. I say, wait a minute, you're talking about my country. You can't do that. Why are we going to be going to United Nations to complain or beg about what God has given to us? Our seas, our waters, our oceans are being occupied, and all the resources there are going to foreigners. Why are we not going to United Nations to complain about foreigners in our territory? Our natural resources are being mined by. So the things we need to do, and I can tell you, it will happen. We will start by making sure that people are the ones in charge, running our affairs. We might not be united, but I keep saying Europe is not one, Asia is not one, but they found the common reality that they need to work hard and deal with their own issues. And that is where we will start.
When Peter Obi made this revelation in December 2023, many people didn't believe him. Some genuinely felt that, this man, you want to be president of Nigeria and you are picking and choosing deals instead of just accepting everything, so that when you get to the office, you can now say, this one, I won't do this, I won't do this one, I will only accept to do this one. Just like what Chris Ngige did. The former Anambra State governor accepted all deals tabled to him by his godfathers. But when he came to office, he turned his back on them. That was why his tenure was characterized by violence, to the extent that they kidnapped him, a sitting governor at the time. So it's not out of the ordinary that people might think or feel that these kind of stories are conspiracy theories. Just like when people say that foreigners, especially Westerners, are actively working against the development of Africa. Many people see it as a conspiracy theory. But following the massive revelation from the USAID funds that Donald Trump has shut down, it was revealed that USAID funds was used to fund propaganda and pushing of narratives in Nigeria, especially during the 2023 presidential election. David Hundeyin, investigative journalist, revealed a massive data of how they were plotting, all the major actors, the narratives they pushed, and the journalists or influencers that they used to push the narrative. Most of these journalists were paid a paltry £333 per month to betray their own country, to work against themselves. It makes no sense that someone will accept money, peanuts for that matter, and work against himself. This is not fiction. It happened in reality. Going through the data released by David Hundeyin, it becomes obvious that these guys actively worked against the interest and emergence of Peter Obi. Not just Peter Obi, all his allies, obedience, even David Hundeyin himself, and all the so-called journalists who call themselves fact-checkers. They were only fact-checking Peter Obi. They never fact-checked anyone from APC, not to talk of Tinubu himself. So you can see what Nigerians are up against. This is not a conspiracy theory. These guys are focused on Nigeria, not just Nigeria, but Africa. One might ask, why? Why are they focused on Africa? The answer can be found in what Peter Obi said in the speech. Africa has the youngest population in the world, Africans are also sitting on massive natural resources that if they utilize them properly, no one, no continent, no population outside Africa can beat Africans themselves. That's why Peter Obi said in the same speech that his focus is to make sure that Nigerians are in charge of everything, natural resources, that we are able to control our natural resources, that it will not be in the hands of foreigners. But come to think of it, in the United States, foreigners don't control their critical infrastructure. In the UK, in Europe, the same thing. In China, everywhere you go, they all control their natural resources. Their destiny is practically in their own hands. It's only in Africa that you see foreigners meddling in affairs, controlling natural resources, controlling even the political space. So these are what Nigerians are up against. These are what Africans are up against. They not only want to control your natural resources, they also want to control the food you eat. This is not trying to raise the argument about whether GMO seeds are good for consumption. No, not at all. But one thing should scare you. These seeds don't germinate on their own. They only germinate once, which means you have to practically depend on the suppliers every planting season. That should scare the living hell out of everyone. If the food you eat depends on one foreigner somewhere, what could go wrong? The worst part is that all the people who would have protested the introduction of GMO seeds in Nigeria are already in their pockets, singing their praises. They don't seem to understand the implication going forward. Why can't we just rely on the organic crops we've been planting in Africa for several centuries? Yes, many may say, the yields are very low. That's why GMO seeds are better. The yields are high. But are we lacking land in Africa? Let's assume we are planting 1 million hectares in Nigeria at the moment. Why can't we double that to increase the yield if the yield is the problem? This is why people must know their place in the world. They must also know how the world works. The world is a massive competitive marketplace. If a new natural resource is discovered today, everyone will scramble for it. So Africans and Nigerians must know that all the natural resources that can be found in our land, foreigners need these natural resources. That's why they will do anything to get their hands on them. They will even go as far as controlling our political office holders. Most of them sell out for peanuts, as you can see from people who call themselves journalists, taking peanuts to betray their own country. And the worst part in all this is that when you oppose them, when you see people opposing them in that narrative, they will turn around to call them saboteurs. They will brand them any name just to discredit them. Meanwhile, they are the real saboteurs. They are the real people sabotaging their own country. Now, let's put it in another perspective so that people can understand exactly what is going on. Think of Africa being developed to the level of China. If that is the reality today, that means virtually no African country will be exporting raw materials in their raw form to any foreign country. They'll be mostly focused on finished goods, just like China does. What would that mean? It will mean that the different companies around the world and their countries that control these finished goods or the natural resources would experience serious downfall. Yes, and once they start losing revenue, that means it will lead to job losses because obviously they can't pay their workers any longer. And that will ultimately lead to loss in taxes. And next one will be depression in their economy. So you can see they are afraid of what you can become. That's why they are working against it right now to make sure that you don't actually actualize your potential. Once you achieve your potential, Africa will become the new world. Everyone will focus here. They will bring massive investments because they know that this will be the place to make the new money. They would like to partake in making that new money. And what will it lead to? It will lead to depression in other parts of the world because the focus has changed. So they are kind of trying to prevent all these from happening. And unfortunately, fellow Africans are helping them to actualize all their plans to make sure that Africans are held down. Like already said, this is no longer a conspiracy theory. It is happening before our very own eyes. Look at the policies of the current administration in Nigeria. They are nothing short of focused on depopulating Nigerians. There's no other way to describe it. Even people involved in subsistence farming, that they farm in their backyard, in their villages, they can't even go to these farms because of massive security challenges. Kidnappings everywhere. Every day you see farmers slaughtered. Nothing is working. They are not doing anything about it. But rather, they continue to spend on their frivolous needs. It's not out of the ordinary. They can't say they don't see all the sufferings. But despite all that, they continue to tax people more. They continue to increase taxes. They continue to spend on sectors that don't matter, that will never alleviate the suffering. So you can see all these people collaborate with foreigners to help them actualize their plans for Africa. Now the question is, how do you fight them? How do you reverse the trend to make sure Africa actually actualizes their potential? You start by looking at what is happening in the Sahel. They have focused mainly on local collaborators. That's where you start. Yes, it takes two for a crime to be committed. If you need to get something in a corrupt way, you need to bribe a government official, it takes two to tango. If you pay him money as bribes, he will do whatever you want. So if these foreigners can't get help from local collaborators, there's no way all their plans can have any effect on Africans. Yes, that's the reality. In other words, we shouldn't just focus on blaming the foreigners. Not that they don't share in any blame, but the main problem are the enemies within. If there are no enemies within, all they will be doing will fall on deaf ears. They wouldn't go any far. Also remember that African ancestors sold their people just because of mere mirrors. They took mirrors from foreigners and exchanged them for human beings. It hasn't stopped. That mentality still exists till today. So we must focus on defeating the enemies within. Yes. Then when that is achieved, we can collectively focus on the foreign enemy. That's how to win and work towards actualizing our potential. Thanks for watching.